So this battle took place on another rather interesting map. This is either near Harad or Winds of Harad. One of those two is the name of it. And we're in the desert regardless. And this is a 3v3 and it is a pitch battle, but again, these battles with sort of varying terrain and such, they often turn into rather different beasts than just sort of a flat field battle. So yes, it is going to be good versus evil as well. And the interesting thing to note is we were all given quite a lot of money to make our armies with. I think it was 15k. You know, the usual is about 13k with a bit of give either way. So these are all quite elite armies that we're going to be looking at. And we'll start off on this side of the map. And my army is the one that's closest. And I'm playing as the Orcs of Gundabad, potentially the strongest faction in the game. At least on regular funds. You know, with 13k, I would say Gundabad's ability to steamroll people is probably enough to put them ahead of the Woodland Realms more often than not. But it's one of those two. But on these funds, with the foe that we're facing, or foes I should say, it is going to be a little bit more even. And, you know, I've got some Warg Riders, so we'll go through the army compositions. And of course, links to the mod DB and the Discord will be in the description below, as well as the timestamp of the battle starting. A couple of units of Wargs, again, primarily to deal with enemy Cav, because with the opponents we're facing, I knew that some Cav would be on the field. I've also got one unit of Numenorian Shadow Guard. Again, you can only bring one before the cost increases, and they are quite vulnerable to enemy missiles, but they are still Gundabad's only good archer unit, really. Again, Gundabad, not really an archer faction. It's definitely not their focus. Brute Force is their focus, and up front, I've got some Witch Realm Scourge Raiders. Again, a very nice offensive unit, good against armor, perhaps a little bit vulnerable in the long run, but the initial damage they can get off if you can support them, they're very strong. And the ideal supporting unit, the ideal frontline unit in many ways in the game at the moment are the Guardians of Khan Doom. Multiple hit points this unit has. 2 hit points, again, a very effective unit. They're not armor piercing, I don't think. I could be wrong about that, but I'm almost certain they're not armor piercing. But really the focus of these guys is pretty hefty defense, and they just form an excellent front line. Just in behind them as well, I've got 2 units of Rudauer Heavy Pikes and 2 units of Witch Realm Pikemen. Both of those two, again, you can only have 2 of each of these before the cost increases, but together they form a very, very efficient pike line, and I'm a big fan of pikes in the game at the moment. I've also got 2 units of Rudauer Berserkers. They have 2 HP, just like the Guardians of Khan Doom, the difference being that they aren't quite as good in terms of skill, and they are a little bit more vulnerable overall, but they are armor piercing. So, you know, they are also getting taken away along with the heavy pikes in the next patch, though, as Rudauer become their own faction. So Gundabad will lose a bit of the strength in depth that they have, but then that's necessary to nerf them a little bit, to be honest. I've also got a unit of Witch Realm Blackguard, so again, probably the most effective main infantry unit Gundabad have. They are armor piercing, which is odd for a sword and board unit, but still. I've also got 2 units of Goblin Trackers. Again, the fact that these guys, aside from the Numenorian Shadow Guard and Gundabad's best archers, really highlights their main weakness. I also have the Hammer Guard back here again, very good on the charge. Again, they lose out to the Blackguard in general melee, but off the charge they are Gundabad's strongest unit, and they are armor piercing, of course, with their giant warhammers. I've also got 2 units of Mountain Trolls just for a bit of mass, and then back down here, just over this ridgeline protected from the archers, we have my general in a unit of Witch Realm Inquisitors. And across the way from me, we find, oh, just overshot them, we have the High Elves, played by Black Swan. Now the High Elves under normal circumstances on 13k funds would probably be outmatched by Gundabad, at least in this situation, you know, a very like sort of a flat line, if you will, easy charge into the main line. But here, with the amount of money that we had available to us, the High Elves were able to afford at least one of all of their best stuff, and on unlimited funds the High Elves are probably the strongest. It remains to be seen whether or not they are going to be sufficient for dealing with Gundabad's main force, but the Elder Enway archers are here, and they are armor piercing archers. So they are going to be able to do a lot of damage to me on the approach, and of course as Gundabad I'm going to be charging in as quickly as I possibly can. They also have Imladris guards, only 1 unit of them I believe, but even so they are, in terms of outright damage, the strongest pike unit in the game. In fact, I might just get a cheeky screenshot of these guys with the sun in the background. Oops. Again, let's see if it crashes. Nope. Again, I am liking the reshader. The YouTube compression does change the effect a little bit, but it's not too bad. They've also got a unit of Falas Lords, of course, very effective, well, very tough to kill spearmen. They don't do a ton of damage, but they won't die easy. He's also got some Elder Enway swordsmen out front. Again, going to be very damaging, but against Gundabad's heavier units they might struggle, particularly against stuff like pikes. There's also Smiths of Aragian here, so you can see all of the high tier infantry is in effect, and the Smiths of Aragian are going to be very effective at dealing with stuff like Guardians of Khan Doom. Back here, of course, he's got his cavalry, Eldarenway nobles. He's also got, I think, some Eldarenway lancers over here. Indeed, he does. So he's got a strong cav force as well. My wargs are going to be able to effectively trade with all of this, particularly the Imladris cavalry. But unfortunately, if the High Elven archers, particularly up here, we can see Nolder Elder nobles, again, they are one of the best units in the game at the moment. They're so strong. If his archers get trained on my wargs, he will win the cav fight, not without too much of a problem. He's also got Mithlon nobles and another unit of Eldarenway archers up here. And then if we look way back here, we can see that there is a unit of Noraturno warriors being held in reserve in this valley, I think so that he could sort of help his allies out more directly, because the High Elves do deploy up on sort of this plateau, and the only way down is actually to go through us. So the High Elves are actually rather isolated as it stands. They could retreat back here to higher ground, but as it stands they are facing me directly. So yeah, that is the High Elves and I. And now moving on to one of my allies playing as Room, we have Czech Norris. Czech Norris. Anyway, he's playing as Room, which of course means crossbows are going to be on the menu. We have Clan Crossbowman. He's also got Flagrim. You know what to expect as Room. He's got chariots now. Chariots at the moment, they are a little bit weak, it must be said. As soon as they stop, they get massacred. But, you know, it's nice to see them just because they are interesting to see on the field. You know, they do sort of bowl over units, but they don't kill an awful lot. They're pretty good at sort of disrupting a line, but they will die quickly, so you need to take advantage of it very fast. He's got some Innis Rim and some bodyguards, so he's got, you know, a lot of the golden cav, and he's pointing at the High Elves, so you can see that the idea immediately here is to try and overwhelm the High Elves and get them off the field quickly, because they are somewhat isolated on this map. But unfortunately for us, the other two armies of good, as it were, occupy very defensive positions, and if the High Elves can do a lot of damage to myself and Rune off the bat, it's going to be very difficult for us to make that up. So again, he's got Gamp Brim, good pike unit, and then back here we've got some clansmen, so he's obviously had to save some money somewhere, and then back here we have all of the elite infantry. We have some Carmel's Chosen, we have 2 units of Loke Scion Rim and 2 units of Carmel's Shadow Guard, and then up on the hill over here he has got, no, those are Uruk-hai. Yes, over here he's got some Balchoth Sapphire Bladesmen, again a very good javelin unit. Not quite as good as the Demons of the Desert, but still very strong. And then I believe he has some hidden units around here. This might be the Dragon's Wrath Crossbowman, somewhere around here. So he's got some hidden units. I think the Carmel's Shadow Bows and the Dragon's Wrath Crossbowman. Yeah, you can see the name tag there. So he's got a very decent ranged presence indeed, more so with his crossbows. So it's going to be difficult for us to approach the High Elves, and also the defensive position of the other two defensive armies. I'm good. I'm always used to like the factions of good being defensive, but here it's more of an even playing field. You can attack and defend as you see fit. It's a 3v3, and then Frischjuice is playing as Isengard in a high funds battle. Isengard, their very high tier units are a little lackluster compared to the other orcs, but their core is very solid. We've got some berserkers over here again. Not a lot of armor, so against the archers of both Eriador and the High Elves they might struggle, but again the High Elves are very far away from them, so it's primarily Eriador these guys need to watch out for. And then we've got some Dunland veterans, again just more of a sort of fodder unit that isn't terrible. Champions of the White Hand, these wargs are going to be very effective if we can get them into enemy cavalry. And of course Trolls of the White Hand, so he's got, obviously all of his elites are going to be in play in some way, shape or form. Uruk Bombers, you don't see these guys an awful lot. Again, I didn't bring the Witches in this fight because they're very easy to focus down. The same can be said of the Uruk Bombers. They are cheaper slightly and they aren't quite as effective. They're difficult to use right, I think, because it seems to me like it's very difficult for them to throw their projectiles. Even so, if they do get rolling, they can be very effective. They are obviously like the Nafatoons of standard medieval too. They do have hit points as well, but again, they are very prone to being focused down. They don't have a lot of armor, and also there are only 28 of them. Right next to them we have the Nazkai Bodyguard again. As a singular unit, they might be the strongest unit on the field here, so while Isengard don't have a huge selection of elite units, the Nazkai Bodyguard certainly throw their hat into the ring there. Again, the Noldor Elders might have something to say about that, but that's only because of their archer capabilities as well. We've got more Berserkers down here, more Dunland veterans, standard Nazkai. So again, we've got quite a few Reavers as well, obviously crossbows, Guards of Orthanc, then some Uruk-hai infantry. You know what to expect from Isengard. I'm a little surprised actually. You know, usually you expect Isengard to bring a healthy amount of Uruk-hai pikemen, but it doesn't look like he's brought a single unit of Uruk-hai pikemen, so he might be going for a little bit more of an aggressive stance when he gets into range of the enemy. He's also got 1 unit of Uruk-hai archers. And his foe is down in this valley over here. Now, obviously, the Free Peoples of Eriador are not going to be advancing into range of Isengard into that cliff, but This is rather interesting because it's a version of Eriador, of course. If you put the era on all, Eriador gain access to some of Arnor's units, which I think should be changed, to be honest with you. It seems a little bit... It's something that I think should be removed. I mean, I'm not complaining about it with regards to this match. I mean, you know, Arnor's units are obviously very, very strong, but I feel as though if Eriador wants to have their own identity, they can't be using Arnor's units as a crutch. And we have some bandit javelins, of course, lower tier javelins, but they can still be very useful. The gatekeepers are one of the most effective units Eriador have at their disposal because obviously they are pole arms in melee, which means against cavalry, these guys are basically the perfect anti-cavalry unit. They can get a volley of crossbow fire off into them, and then they can start poking away in melee. So again, he's got a full line of gatekeepers, which again, you can't blame them for bringing them again. I would bring the gatekeepers over any other unit from Eriador. Here we have some Arnor pikemen, of course. Under normal circumstances, this would be the Cardolan footman, but obviously with the Arnor units, we have Arnor pikes. He's got some Forest Shell heavy swords. Again, these guys have got pretty decent armor. They're nothing too special, but they will hold the line, and they will back up the pikes very well. He's also got Battle Ready Dunedain. These will be an Eriador only unit in the next patch, so good to see them. Up here, let's see what he's got here. Cardolan Royal Guard. Now, Cardolan Royal Guard are multiple HP spears. Again, they are a little bit lightweight with regards to some of their stats, but the fact that they do have hit points means that they can be quite effective at holding a line, provided they're backed up. Again, you know, Eriador are a little bit more reliant on sort of clever play, as it were, to get the most out of them. And he's also got some Dunedain Rangers, but they, of course, will be hidden. And then down here he has Knights of Anumenos, which again are traditionally an Arnor unit. As it stands, probably as a cav unit, not as good as the Kalanardon Knights, but the fact that you can have two of them probably makes them overall the best cav unit in the game at the moment. And he does have two of them somewhere. He also has Arnor bodyguards, so his cav force is very, very strong. He's got Forest Shell captains as well. That's what Eriador is really bringing to the table here, his cav force. In this sort of more open part of the field down here, in this basin, he's going to have a real advantage against someone like Isengard who doesn't have any pikes. Bandit javelins, and then the Arnor gate guards again. So the Arnor gate guards are very, very strong pikes indeed. And then the final army, these compositions have been rather drawn out, are the dwarves, played by General WVPM. Who's playing Eriador again? Vedetas. Oh, what's that? The other Knights of Anumenos. They're sort of back there. I guess he forgot to move them. Yes, the dwarves being played by General WVPM. Again, another faction who, when you have sort of higher funds like 15k, they can afford to bring all their best stuff, and then they become very, very scary. So breaking down the dwarves and the elves is going to be difficult. We're going to have to be clever about how we approach this. The Blacklock engineers, of course, have the power to spray down an entire unit very, very quickly. And then at the front over here, he's got Ironfoot crossbowmen. Of course, the dwarven crossbow line is so formidable. Not easy to skirmish down either because of their armor. Obviously, high-tier archers will do it, but you don't really want to be using your high-tier archers in a skirmish fight if you can help it. You want to really gain the advantage in the melee fight with them. He's got several units of Ironfoot pikes, so again, nice anti-cav if we have any of our cav left after dealing with that Arnor. Well, I say Arnor, Eriador cav technically. He's got Mithril Guard. He's got Guards of Khazad Doom. He's got Ironfoot Guard as well. They're multiple HP. They're not armor piercing, but multiple HP. Sons of Durin, Sons of the Fallen. Then over here he's got his dragons. So again, he's got all of his high tier infantry, every single one of them. And I think that might be just about it. So he has got a relatively small army actually for the dwarves, but he's brought along all of his strongest stuff. And that is nothing to be sneezed at. It is going to be a while before both Eriador and, I was going to say Arnor then, but the dwarves get into battle. So let us begin. This is likely to be quite a long one because I don't think there's going to be any cuts, and there is 44,000 frames. So as you can see, the skirmish begins already because both factions are in range of each other. Now the skirmish is something that I will very handily lose. Obviously my Numenor and Shadow Guard are not bad, but they're not going to be sufficient to beat the High Elves on their own, and the Goblin Trackers are just not going to be able to get through the High Elven armour at all. So really my best bet is to charge in and really try and buckle their line as quickly as possible. It's what Gundabad do. It's the default for any Gundabad player. Obviously with the variety they have in their units and their strength in depth, you can play them in other ways, but Gundabad's rush is so strong, and you don't even have to be that organised in order to make it stick. I'm leading the way with Guardians of Khan Doom, Witch Realm Scourge Raiders and Rudal Berserkers. My Rudal Berserkers are the ones really taking the brunt of the Elder Enway Archer fire here at the front. Also my Witch Realm Scourge Raiders are taking quite a beating on the way forward, which is not too surprising. They are weak to missiles after all. But again, I think that he's retreating his Falas Lord, Smiths of Eregion and Meladris Guards. I wouldn't recommend that at all. I mean, he is now turning around his Smiths, because if his archers get into melee, that's going to be a lot of ammunition wasted. And they're not going to do very well against Rudal Berserkers in melee. Especially not when they're backed up by Witch Realm Blackguard. Again, you can see the Witch Realm Scourge Raiders charging in. The Smiths of Eregion are coming for them. And obviously that is a fight that the Witch Realm Scourge Raiders will very, very handily lose. But just the fact that I'm going to be able to engage most of his army in melee is going to be significant. He is now pulling back his archers, which is good to see. He's bringing forward his Imladris Guards, and he also has a unit of Sindar Blade Masters that I missed in the army compositions. Sindar Blade Masters charging into the Guardians of Khan Doom. Again, these Rudal Berserkers, I'm charging them forward. They're going to be engaging the pikes. Now, the Imladris Guards should beat the Rudal Berserkers, honestly, if they're backed up. But unfortunately, they are on their own, which is very bad for them. It means they're likely to be overwhelmed, especially with the Blackguard right behind them and a very extensive pipeline of my own. We can see over here as well that the Runic Cavalry force has arrived very quickly from Czech Norris. He's got his bodyguard and his Lok Innas Rim. And again, if we look up here, we can see that my wargs, they chased off and did a lot of damage to that Imladris cavalry. Unfortunately, my wargs are really just sort of pushing through the Mythlon nobles and are actually going into the spikes. So that's unfortunate for me. I'm also bringing my Witch Realm Inquisitors around. So with the addition of the Runic Cav and my Cav, we should be able to do a lot of damage. These Noldor Elders will be able to do a lot of damage to my Witch Realm Inquisitors should they target them though. Again, we can see the Witch Realm Hammer Guard have also been brought up. And this really is the unfortunate thing for the High Elven player. Again, if I were him, I probably would have deployed a little further back on the high ground to make my approach even longer and more difficult, because the fact that we deployed so close together means that I was able to charge in and really get into melee as quickly as possible. And that's where Gundobad's strength lies. Now my pikes are really getting into the fray as well. The Smiths of Eregion, they may be a very elite unit, and victory seems certain with only 47 of them up against a ton of Witch Realm Scourge Raiders and Rudar Heavy Pikes. But unfortunately for them, I just have, again, I've got my Mountain Trolls in and around the back of them as well. I'm going to charge my Mountain Trolls into that Imladris Cavalry. You can see that this bodyguard is going to charge into the backs of these Elder Enway Archers. The Chariots are also over here, although the Chariots have already been decimated by something. Probably the Falas Lords, to be honest with you. And we can see the Witch Realm Inquisitors I'm pulling through after a charge on the Noldor Elders. Unfortunately for the High Elven player, he is being overwhelmed somewhat, but getting rid of a lot of these elite units is going to cost me. But me taking the brunt of these casualties is fine, as long as Rune has his army mostly intact. And I'm trying to spray down these Elder Enway Archers with my Goblin Trackers. These Sindar Blade Masters are routing again. The sheer weight of numbers of the Guardians of Khan Doom and the Witch Realm Pikemen was too much for them to bear. And again, if we get in nice and close to this fight, I do love the look of the Witch Realm units. And the Imladris Guards are so impressive when they get going in melee, but unfortunately they were just overwhelmed here. And you can see they did actually do quite a lot of damage to the Rudal Berserkers, but unfortunately for them, they were just crumpled. They needed a unit to back them up, and unfortunately the High Elves had nothing to spare with the assault that we made. It was very quick, and now my Witch Realm Hammer Guard have charged into the rear of what was the Smiths of Eregion. There's only 16 of them left. There's this one engaged in melee with a Scourge Raider, and the pikes are just in behind. Now unfortunately over here, we can see that I'm bringing my Mountain Trolls in to try and deal with the Noldor Elders. You can see there my Witch Realm Inquisitors, there's only 9 of them left. Essentially my cavalry is all gone at this point. Unfortunately, the High Elven Archers were mostly focused on my cavalry, my wargs and my Inquisitors, so my cav force is pretty much gone. Runes is still in effect, however the High Elven cavalry is still reasonably intact. I mean, he's got these Elder Enway nobles. They won't go down easily, 19 of them left. He's also got 9 Lancers remaining, and with the Witch Realm Inquisitors taking the brunt of the Noldor Elder fire, they will pretty quickly die, and that means my general will die. And obviously Gundobad is an Orc faction, losing their general is a little bit worrying. There goes my general, eviscerated by the Noldor Elders. However, we are going to be victorious over here. The champions of the White Hand also joined us.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
So as we can see, the Witch Realm Pikemen, the Guardians of Khan Doom, and the Blackguard going to try and finish off these Elder Enway Archers, and behind them we can see the Gamp Brim. So if we look at the percentages killed, again, the percentages of allies killed is higher than percentage of enemies killed. Again, the High Elves, if you think about the percentages, most of that will be from Eriador. The High Elves obviously not the most numerous faction, but just the fact that we're going to be able to sort of squash an army off the bat is going to help us in the long run. As we can see, the Goblin Trackers, they're out of ammunition now, charging into melee, trying to get a counter charge off on the Elder Enway Nobles for all the good that will do me. Again, the Elder Enway Nobles, the heart and soul of the Elven Cavalry Force. Not very numerous, but so fast, so effective. Maybe not quite as overpowered as the Elder Kingsguard can be, depending on what parameters they are set to. And over here we can see my Númenórean Shadow Guard. They're fighting against the Elder Enway Lancers, but there aren't enough Lancers to make this count, and now with the Champions of the White Hand, they are doomed. As we can see over here, the Trolls of the White Hand are fighting against these Elder Enway Archers. They are pulling back though, unfortunately. This Elder Enway Archer unit could be mopped up here, but unfortunately not. You can see the power of the Noldor Elders up here. They've managed to mulch their way through 2 units of relatively healthy mountain trolls, in addition to, well, they took that initial charge from the Blackguard. Again, half my army remains. We can see in there the Falas Lords fighting back to back, surrounded by Pikes and Hammer Guard and Guardians of Khan Dûm. The Falas Lords are not really praised for their killing power, it's their survivability. So they will hang on in there, but ultimately it's a futile effort for them at this point. And we can see that Rune, his job is done. He knows that this battle is won, and he is pulling his forces back again. There are ways down over there, down into the valley, and you can see that Eriador is sort of moving his cavalry in and around. Isengard is getting ready to advance down into them. Again, Isengard not having pikes could really cost them dearly against Eriador's cavalry. And again, the Elder Enway Nobles are still alive, and they're charging into the backs of these Rudauer pikes. When the pikemen turn around, that's going to be trouble for them. You can see that they are starting to fall. But they did actually get a few kills on my pikes. And again, as many kills as they can is going to be the important thing here. I'm trying to bog down his Elder Enway Nobles with my Goblin Trackers. I mean, they are well and truly the fodder of my army. Again, but if we look up here, we can see that the Noldor Elders were victorious and they still have ammunition. Firing their bows. You can see the Witch Realm Inquisitors that are dead around them, the Trolls. And over here, these Mithlon Nobles are still alive as well, so he does still have a melee unit chasing off these Trolls of the White Hand. My Númenórean Shadow Guard are also on the move. The Runic Cavalry has also been savaged, so the High Elven player, while he was defeated, he did go down swinging. He did remove quite a lot of our calf presence, which may well cost us in the late game, or at least the mid game. Whenever we have to deal with Eriador's cavalry, that's going to be a problem, particularly because of Isengard's lack of pikes. I do have a lot of pikes, but of course they are very tired after their exertions in trying to face the High Elves. Now, I did notice the Noldor Elders were still alive, so I'm sending over my Númenórean Shadow Guard, my Goblin Trackers, what's left of my Rudauer Berserkers, both units of my Goblin Trackers, and what's left of my Witch Realm Scourge Raiders. Now, I wasn't expecting these guys to actually win, but I didn't want to commit all the resources to actually finishing off these Noldor Elders, because I didn't want to get my pikes anywhere near his ranged fire, because they still have a lot of damage to go through, and I was hoping that my allies would charge them with cav, but unfortunately they retreated their cav, and as you can see, the Goblin Trackers routed before they even got there. So this really is actually just a story. The Noldor Elders should win this fight against all of these units, but they should be a little bit worse for wear after engaging them. Unfortunately for me, these Elder Enway Archers are still firing as well, so that will definitely tip the balance. As we can see, I've got my pikes sort of lined up here, just sort of waiting in the wings. But look over here, the Eriador Archers, the Dunedain Rangers, firing into the Khamûl's Shadow Bows. The Shadow Bows are very much an ambush-focused archer. They are pretty decent, but as soon as they're spotted, they melt so quickly to arrow fire. It's a very noticeable weakness, and their missile damage is only 9, and again, only is perhaps a little bit harsh, but again, for an archer of their cost, I would expect it to be at least 10. Again, I don't really see the point of bringing the Khamûl's Shadow Bows, when if you want archers, the Narim serve perfectly well, and really the runic crossbows and, you know, those javelins and the high tier crossbows are really what you want from Rune. But obviously we have some Isengard forces down here. The Uruk-hai infantry is in force. The Isengard are on the march. For now though, the only fight that is ongoing is this one over here. And again, the finest that the High Elves have to offer, up against a combination of Black Númenóreans and Savage Northmen. And again, defeat seems certain. And unfortunately, in the background over there, you can see 28 Mithlon Nobles. That will tip the fight in the High Elves' favour over here. But I am at least doing what I set out to do and crippling the power of the High Elves' strongest unit. And the Númenórean Shadow Guard are not bad in melee either. Again, you can see that all the goblins have long since routed. Really, the thing that's giving me my melee power here is what's left of my Rudal Berserkers. They're not a bad unit at all. They may lack a little bit in survivability compared to other sword and board units, but the armor piercing they offer is very nice, and it's really one of the units that gives... My army is already tired. It just goes to show that facing the High Elves on high funds like this, even with help from Rune, is a hard task. Again, my approach was maybe a little sloppy. I could have done a little better. There's also one Elder Enway Noble still alive. It's the General, in fact. And that charge was enough to rout my Númenórean Shadow Guard. My Rudal Berserkers won't rout, however. I'm doing my best, but over here, the High Elves do have a semblance of an army left alive, and of course they do still have that one unit of Norretino warriors that they had in reserve. I've also got those Goblin Trackers up there that are wavering, but I think they're actually taking missile fire, so just the fact that they're absorbing arrow fire, I'm more than okay with that. And over here you can see that my pikes, I'm still there, but I'm sort of retreating them, and I'm going to move them down this road over here and send them to link up with our main force that is over here. And if we look at the percentages, we are still 2% behind, technically speaking, but again, the elves account for the smallest percent, and I account for quite a lot of that, obviously, with the hefty amount of Goblin Trackers that I've lost and Witch Realm Scourge Raiders. A lot of my elite units are still reasonably intact. Obviously, the Black Guard is still almost virtually untouched, and the Hammer Guard are doing very well for themselves, in addition to having all of my pikes still relatively healthy. And now the second phase of the fight, which will take place down here, Eriador. You can see that really the problem that we're going to have is over here on this elevated ground. The only way to get up here is behind, which means we're going to have to go around. We're going to have to try and traverse their cavalry, and also they have gatekeepers here as well, battle ready Dunedain. And really the problem we're going to have in trying to sort of get up onto this position is the gate guards. Forcing your way through the gate guards, especially when they're backed up by something like Forest Shell Captains, is going to be nigh on impossible. So Eriador have occupied a very good position. They really need to be backed up by the Dwarves. The Dwarves are trying to camp that mountain over there, which is another pretty good position, but they need to coordinate. They need to really set up one defensive position now that one of their allies is largely gone, and really try and make their percentage advantage count. Because again, with that cavalry, they could really hammer that home, and if they set up a defensive position effectively with that Dwarven elite infantry, we're going to find it very difficult to break through, even with all of Rune's high tier skirmishers. And again, if the Eriador player plays it well, he's going to be able to do a good deal of damage to that. There's also a lot of spikes here. The Eriador position, I think he is now actually falling back to this sort of staked position, trying to get into a bit more of an advantageous position for him. Again, he's not going to be able to beat Isengard in a straight brute force fight, and Isengard is going to be leading the way down from this hill. Again, this is one of the roads down, and you can see that these Uruk-hai archers are sort of getting into position. There is another road down over there, I believe. Again, it's a little bit hard to see where the roads down off this cliff are, but as you can see, I think it's this actually. You can see the sort of the slightly lighter shade, and there's some Dunland veterans down there. The Dunland veterans actually are lucky they're not being charged by Knights of Numinos. I guess the presence of the crossbows is sort of warding off the Knights from being too reckless. And of course, with Rune and Isengard in tow, we do have a very strong crossbow contingent. The lack of pikes may well cost us in the long run though. Again, Uruk Reavers are not likely to be too efficient against Eriador, although with the amount of Arnor units, maybe. It remains to be seen. Dunedain Rangers. The way that Rangers are changing in the next patch intrigues me. They will be able to hit more than... They'll have body piercing essentially, so if a unit is tightly packed, the arrow will essentially be able to pierce more than one soldier before it dissipates, for lack of a better term. So it'll be able to go through 2, maybe 3 for the highest tier Rangers. So they'll be able to do, their reputation as glass cannons will be reinforced by that, and they'll be more worth picking, I find. And the Rangers, of course, have got a very nice shot onto these Isengard forces as they advance. Again, Uruk-hai archers and Uruk Reavers are very lightly armoured, very vulnerable to missiles. There's also Uruk-hai crossbows there, so Eriador going to be able to focus them down. Of course, the Dunedain Rangers will need to retreat behind the pike line that they've established pretty soon, because the Uruk Reavers are charging forward with all due haste. And this is going to be the second phase of the battle down here in the more open plains. with elevated ground on both sides. Again, if Eriador occupies this area up here as well, it's going to be a real killing field, and I think Isengard knows that, so he's going to try and sort of go up there and sort of fight them on even footing up on the cliffs, if it comes to that. These Uruk Reavers, though, are advancing forward very quickly, trying to sort of chase off those rangers, and they are doing so, but of course one unit of Reavers on their own doesn't stand a chance against the pike line. The Reavers are not a bad unit at all, though. Again, in a more rush-focused Isengard army, you'll be seeing quite a lot of them, because you can have 5 or 6 before the cost increases, and as you can see, Isengard are indeed going up to the higher ground, trying to get a force up there, comprising mainly of crossbows. You can see Uruk-hai infantry as well. 3 units of crossbows, I think, is heading up there, and the Nazkai bodyguard. So just the presence of the Nazkai bodyguard is going to sort of make it so Eriador can't really attack over here, but again, I would say that the Knights of Anúminos being over here and charging into these guys would be probably the best course of action at the moment. The crossbows are running and they're very tired, so them turning around and getting shots off, they'd only likely get 1 shot off, and just the Nazkai bodyguard getting a charge off on them would be too good an opportunity to pass up, at least for me. The risk would be worth it. There's the Uruk bombers. You can see the vast majority of our army. You can also see that Rune is also starting to, well, and Isengard, a lot of Isengard's forces are also sort of slowly marching, but Rune is also coming down this hill, setting up a force primarily made up of Gamp Rim to sort of tie down the front line, and then obviously Loke Flag Rim. Both of the factions that well, certainly the Dwarves, but Eriador with their Forest Shell units have got their armoured elements as well, so the Flag Rim will be a good unit to use there. There's quite a lot of dead bodies here thanks to the Rangers, and in fact I think that the Uruk Reavers attempted to sort of charge, and they were drawn in rather, although the Uruk Reavers actually are facing a unit of Cardinal and Royal Guard that are on their own, and as spears again, shock infantry is very effective against spears. Even a unit of pretty decent spears like Cardinal and Royal Guard against a very basic unit of shock infantry is going to take some pretty substantial losses, but the pikes are now coming in, and maybe a little bit too slowly, but now that the pikes are on scene, the Reavers will start to fall. But yeah, they are routing actually, in fact, but just the fact that they were able to do quite a lot of damage to a fairly expensive, fairly elite unit of Cardinal and Royal Guard meant that sending them forward on their own turned out to be worth it, really. Again, there's only 33 of them left. Again, spears, not the most effective infantry killers. Line holders, at most in this patch anyway. They will get a bit more of a... They will be made better in the next patch, I believe. Their effectiveness against cavalry will be bigged up a little bit more, and their effectiveness, particularly in formation. Like, they're already pretty solid in shield wall and the like, but they're going to be made a little bit better, a little bit more worth it, shall we say. These Dunland veterans, again, this position that they've got up here with these gatekeepers, they are actually firing. Are they firing at those veterans? Not really the most worthwhile target to go after. They are firing. At what, though? Yeah, they are. They're firing at the veterans. Again, not the best target to go after, but it's at least they're getting kills, I suppose. Eriador is starting to move their army forwards a little bit. Again, Isengard have no cav, and Eriador have got all of the cav advantages, so potentially, I mean, I can see why they're doing this, certainly. Isengard have managed to get a fortified position up there with some of their units, but I think now what they're going to try and do is sort of cut off the rest of this Isengard force from joining up. So again, it's only a portion of this Isengard army that is rather... What is that? We can see Dunedain Rangers sort of trying to sort of fire in there. I heard the horn, I thought it was a cav charge then, but we can see that if Eriador deigns to use their cav on this blob over here, there's not really much Isengard could do about it. I mean, there are Guards of Orthanc here, but they don't do a lot of damage. They're pretty heavily armoured, but aside from that, the Guards of Orthanc are a pretty underwhelming unit. There are Clansmen out here as well, which, again, not the most scary unit. Berserkers. Those Knights of Anúminos are looming large. You can see the Dwarves are actually coming down off their mountain, so they are going to join Eriador here in this sort of more forward position, which I can understand why. They need to group up and they need to consolidate. Those Dunlanding veterans taking a lot of fire from those gatekeepers, but they're absorbing ammunition, doing their job well. This Eriador force here, what are they doing? I mean, they're trying to set up a sort of pike line. The Isengard force did pull back. I think they realised They weren't going to. I mean, this Isengard force over here is now rather isolated. If they applied the right units, they could dislodge them, but it is tricky because these archers maybe not so much, but the amount of crossbows they've got over here means they can't just charge forward, otherwise they will be mown down. It would be like the Somme. So they do need to be careful. The Dunedain Rangers are just the sort of unit you want to be using over here. Again, the Uruk-hai Archer is not really the best unit in the world. There's Cardland Royal Guard, the very depleted unit. There's also Forest Shell Heavy Swords being sent over. If they're going to commit over here, they do need to commit quite a few units, simply because the Nazkai Bodyguard will chew through Forest Shell Heavy Swords. Yes, we can see the Eriador just waiting. There is a bit of a lull here in the fight. You can see that up here, you know, this is the majority of, this is basically my army that is left. There's also some units in the background over there. But again, most of the units that I have left are fairly elite, including my pikes. So basically my army will be committed to support whoever needs it. I'm looking a little worse for wear after my encounter with the High Elves on high funds, but again I think that they left a few gaps, and I think that a narrower position would have benefited the High Elves a little bit more. And again, we can see that these Dunedain Rangers are firing. Again, I think most of their missiles are actually hitting the cliff, though. They're a little bit too close to the cliff edge. Let's see. Yeah. A lot of ammo is being wasted, which can't really be afforded. And look at all those arrows just stuck in the side of the cliff. But actually seeing as their target is Uruk-hai Archers, again, not the most elite unit, they definitely should be going for the crossbows. The crossbows are the real threat over here. Isengard are going to be difficult to dislodge from this sort of cliff position if they don't apply their ammunition to the crossbows. Again, I overshot that rather dramatically, but we can see the Knights of Anuminas making a play for these clansmen. Again, not the most high profile target, but they will be absolutely eviscerated on target. You can see the Gatekeepers are also targeting the clansmen. Again, just like the last battle I talked about, that wasn't really much of a charge either. Still one of them went flying. The Gatekeepers have much better things to go after than standard clansmen. So far, the Forces of Evil have done a good job at baiting the Forces of Good into using their ammunition on units that really aren't worth it. These Champions of the White Hand, these bodyguards, standard Arnor bodyguards, going to charge into the Champions of the White Hand, or not. Again, these pikes are sort of slowly walking into position. These bodyguards don't stand a chance against the combination of Arnor bodyguards and Arnor pikemen. The bodyguards on their own would take a few losses to Champions of the White Hand, but again, the Champions have already been in combat against the High Elves. And down here you can see that I'm sort of sending my units down the hill. Champions of the White Hand, however, are doomed, unfortunately. You can see that these Knights of Anuminas have taken virtually no losses. There's a very slow charge into the front of Gamp Rim, though. Again, they need to get out of there before the Gamp Rim really start to inflict casualties. You can see that very quickly a very strong unit of Knights of Anuminas starting to lose a few men. Again, they need to form up a bit more of a line. Again, they're a little bit crisscrossed over here. Now that these Knights of Anuminas are sort of being committed, so to speak, the crossbows should be utilised to mow them down. And over here, what's left of my army has started to make their move, led by the Witch Realm Blackguard and the Guardians of Khan Doom, my strongest unit, or at least my most durable units. Unfortunately for the enemy as well, with all of this Uruk-hai infantry, the Forest Shell Heavy Swords really no match for the Nazkai Bodyguard, and the Dunedain Rangers trying to run away, the crossbows as well, shooting the Forest Shell Heavy Swords on the retreat, making sure they don't come back. So that little excursion from Eriador was relatively unsuccessful, but their cavalry charges, again, that was a nice charge into the Uruk-hai infantry, and you can see how fast the unit starts to fall off a good charge. Again, the Knights of Anuminas, ever since Vanilla, have been a very, very strong cav unit, and they've never lost that distinction. And the Uruk-hai infantry, the Knights of Anuminas do need to get out of melee though quickly, because the Gamp Rim are on the way. Those Knights of Anuminas charging into what's left of those Dunland veterans, which should send them routing. I mean, they're just going to go right through them. There's routing clansmen as well. I'm charging all of my army down the hill, trying to gain us a position over here. Again, a lot of my pikes are here, so the likelihood of him using his Arnor bodyguard on my position is pretty low. And again, Arnor pikemen are routing. And a real theme, actually, was the terror that or fear that you could say, that my Witch Realm Blackguard were inflicting. Again, these pikemen, they'd taken a few losses. Again, these Guards of Orthanc were also in play, and despite being relatively healthy, they were exhausted, and as a result, the terror from the Witch Realm units sent them routing. There's still some champions the White Hand alive, 2 of them. Near those pikes, though, they will very quickly die, but again, I'm able to answer the Arnor pikes with my own pikeman, so they won't have an advantage over me on that front. There's also Uruk-hai infantry being sent across to reinforce. Need to be careful those bodyguards don't charge them. These Knights of Illuminus are running. This unit of Knights of Illuminus is charging into the backs of these Uruk-hai infantry. This Gamp Rim, will it? No. This Knights of Illuminus is going to get a very nice charge up on the Uruk-hai infantry. They do need to get out relatively quickly though, because the Gamp Rim will start to kill them off pretty quickly if they don't. Again, that was another nice charge though. Knights of Illuminus being used relatively well. I mean, they are dying, but they are getting a lot of kills. Oh, and they did spot that unit of Uruk-hai infantry that was relatively isolated, so the bodyguard's going to get into them. Again, a nice charge, thinning out the ranks of the Isengard rank and file. And I'm sort of trying to get my pikes into position so I can't be charged by the Knights of Illuminus again. I think he was hoping to sort of wrap around my units that are sort of coming down the hill and making a gap, but I'm not having any of that. Again, that Witch Realm pike unit is a little bit worse for wear. I've got my Numenor and Shadow Guard. They did come back from routing, 23 of them. But I was able to sort of force the Arnor pikemen away from here. So I have managed to sort of make a little gap, and my army is now down here in the basin as well. Again, the Knights of Illuminus are starting to take some attritional losses at this point. They need to be careful. I mean, they do need to save their cavalry if it's all possible and go for more vulnerable targets. That position over there is well fortified by Rune's pikes. And this one over here is now fortified by my pikes. So Isengard's lack of pikes has been compensated for. These Knights of Illuminus are running around as well. I'm going to try and shut them down with my pikes. I'm just sort of trying to squeeze them. They are actually going to sort of frontally charge my Witch Realm pikemen though, which is a bold move. I mean, my pikes didn't get their pikes down, so they are actually going to take a lot of losses from the Knights of Illuminus. But the Knights of Illuminus will take a few more losses there, and now my other unit of Witch Realm pikemen is on scene. But they did manage to kill another unit of mine. That's unfortunate for us. If we look up here, the main enemy defensive position is still here. And now that the Dwarven crossbowmen have sort of got up along, the ridge line is now littered with high tier crossbows. The gatekeepers have been wasting their ammo mainly on units that aren't worth it. The Guards of Orthanc, slightly more worth it. I mean, they are very heavily armoured. What are they going for now? Looks like just sort of bits and pieces. Yeah, like Guards of Orthanc like that, a unit of 2. Definitely not worth it. The Carmel's shadow bows are actually returning fire. The Blacklock engineers are firing as well. So again, the enemy are really unloading their payload right now. Provided they're in range of good stuff, that's not too bad. Again, this Knights of Illuminus got too greedy after that nice charge into pikes, and it went right into the middle of my Witch Realm Hammer Guard and pretty much all of my pike units. So this Knights of Illuminus is now largely taken care of. And we can see this unit of Uruk-hai archers just sort of charging, not getting any kills, but trying to slow down the approach. You can see, where is the other? The bodyguard is still there, still relatively healthy. Knights of Illuminus slightly less so. Now my hammers did take a pretty lethal charge as well. 46 of them left remaining. My blackguard is still largely intact wherever they are though. And if we look up here, we can see that Isengard have well and truly cemented their position over here on the cliffs with crossbows. That Nazkai bodyguard is still up here as well. The Uruk-hai crossbows shooting down that Knights of Illuminus as it attempts to escape. So again, well and truly dealing with the Eriador Cav. So we have advanced, but the situation is still, if we look at the percentages, you know, we have fallen even further behind in the percentages, which again maybe is not unexpected considering a lot of Isengard Uruk-hai infantry died to Cav charges. But even so, with a percentage deficit, we now essentially have to assault this central position the enemies have taken up. It's not too bad because we do have a lot of runic crossbow ammunition and we do have the runic elites left, but what I'm really concerned about at the moment is the Dwarven elite infantry. However, they are not using the Dwarven elite infantry defensively. Instead, they're trying to take the initiative, which is admirable. The Dragon Slayers, the Sons of Durin, the Sons of the Fallen, the Guards of Khazad-dûm, and the Mithril Guard, all of the Dwarven elite units are coming over here to try and dislodge Isengard from the cliffs. That, while admirable, is a very questionable decision simply because the crossbows are littered in these cliffs. And if we look here, the crossbows are going to be able to get very nice shots on the dwarves as they approach. Yeah, if we look there, they are reloading. And look at that. Firing into the Sons of Durin, and that is a very elite unit, taking a lot of losses. With how slow that the crossbows fire, they might make it. Again, the Dragon Slayers are a very, very expensive unit indeed. I believe they're one of the highest mass units in, well, of infantry anyway in the game. And as we can see, seeing that the dwarves have sent over all of their elites over here, I decided to try and shut the door on them by sending, again, my army is starting to look very depleted, but I'm going to try and sort of shut the door on them by surrounding them here to make sure they can't escape, and also to give Isengard's infantry a hand, because eventually this Dwarven elite infantry will be able to fight their way through the crossbows, despite the losses, and they will be able to engage their infantry in melee. And again, despite the Nazkai bodyguard, the Nazkai bodyguard would find themselves overwhelmed by such a dizzying array of elite infantry, all of which is armor piercing, all of which is very heavy duty. Again, there's Guards of Orthanc over here, but they will do very, very little damage. The Uruk-hai archers, you can see the torches that the Sons of Durin, with their mighty warhammers, they are going to rip through the Uruk-hai infantry like they weren't even there. Again, the Guards of Orthanc are going to get up here, and the Guards of Orthanc might be able to delay them long enough for my units to get into position and try and help them. We shall see. Again, Sons of Durin, I've seen firsthand how effective they can be. You can see I've got Numenor and Shadow Guard, which there is actually a way up the hill here. So I'm going to send my Shadow Guard and my Hammer Guard up here. Hammer Guard, of course, very effective against armor. Should do quite well against the dwarves, provided they're supported. The Sons of the Fallen and the Mithril Guard taking a lot of crossbow fire. So Isengard, you know, really the action is over here, because for the time being we're just going to try and deal with these dwarven units, and then we will try and advance on this position over here that the enemy have occupied. Got a lot of my pikes sort of moving into position. The Sons of the Fallen taking such a heavy amount of crossbow fire. It is only crossbows up there though, so eventually they will have to go into melee. And over here we can see that my Hammer Guard are getting into melee against Guards of Khazad-dûm. Unfortunately, the Hammer Guard, they are depleted enough to the point where the Guards of Khazad-dûm will be victorious if I don't manage to reinforce my Shadow Guard and my Hammer Guard as quickly as possible. Again, I've got my pikes sort of cresting the horizon. Whether they make it in time remains to be seen. And then up here, there's another route upwards, which again, I'm trying to sort of give the Guards of Orthanc a hand against these Dragon Slayers and the Sons of Durin with my Witch Realm Blackguard and what's left of my Guardians of Khan Dûm. Just trying to get the crossbows to do the work here. Because again, the Blackguard are very, very good, but even in spite of how good they are, most of the Dwarven units will be able to beat them. But still, a true battle of elites is taking place over here, although the Dwarves certainly have the advantage. Even if it was just regular, they would have the advantage, but of course my units have had to go through a challenge from the High Elves. And as you can see, I'm running my Rudar heavy pikes into battle as quickly as I possibly can to try and engage these Guards of Khazad-dûm. Again, the Hammer Guard are being made to fight uphill in some cases as well. So I'm going to try and get the partial surround off on them with the pikemen at least. And again, the pikes will kill Dwarven high tier units so slowly because of the armor. But of course the pikes will, the pikes will hold though. It's just how pikes operate. And now the balance, defeat seems, the balance is even. It flickers back and forth, but just the fact that I've got these Rudauer in there has stabilised the situation. Again, the hammers, there aren't many of them left, only 18. We go back over here. The Blackguard and the Guardians of Khan Dûm are great enough in number, and with the support of the crossbows back here, the Dragon Slayers, and in particular the Sons of Durin, which took the brunt of that crossbow fire. And there you can see the dwarves, the Dwarven General, King Dane, slain by the Blackguard with their mighty shields. And again, the Nazkai bodyguard are also moving up, so we're going to try and smash through this pocket of resistance as quickly as we possibly can. And again, the Witch Realm pikemen, I'm getting into position, and I'm going to try and surround the Mithril Guard. Now the Mithril Guard, of course, the sturdiest of all the Dwarven infantry. It's not going to be, again, particularly with pikemen, the pikes are just going to kill them so slowly. But just the fact that I'm going to keep them occupied while the crossbows try and shoot into them Again, there are Sons of the Fallen still alive as well, but only 2 of them. The Sons of the Fallen were the focus of that crossbow fire. Now, that has changed. And they are now sandwiched in between crossbow fire, a unit of crossbows that is admittedly out of ammo and in melee, and my pikeman. So I'm doing what I can to try and help Isengard weather this storm. Unfortunately for me, the High Elves are back with a vengeance. Their unit of Noraturno warriors, which is essentially at this point their only healthy unit, because I think the Noldor Elders did actually get chased off the field by Berserkers in the end. So these Noraturno warriors are all the High Elves have left. Also, I think their general is also running around somewhere. But the Noraturno warriors are going to be shooting my Rudire heavy pikes in the back. And if this was allowed to continue, my pikes would die. So I immediately took them out of formation and tried to charge down the elves so that they couldn't do that. This does, of course, mean surrendering my Hammer Guard to death to the Guardians, well, to the guards of Khazad-dûm. But I'd rather keep my pikes intact than save a very depleted unit of Hammer Guard. And hopefully we can win this fight over here and reinforce them anyway, and try and crush the Guardians, again, I keep saying Guardians, the guards of Khazad-dûm. And again, of course, pikes up here, getting their killing done very, very slowly. But surely. Again, the crossbows are using up all their ammunition. I still think that, honestly, I think crossbows have got too much ammunition. Again, it doesn't matter that crossbows have got the same amount of ammo as archers and they shoot more slowly. The damage they can potentially inflict, I think the trade-off should be that you have less ammunition. I'm fine with the amount of damage they do, even to elite infantry like this. I just think they should be able to do it over a shorter period of time. I think that they shouldn't have the amount of ammo they do, particularly with the Uruk-hai crossbows. It seems to be a problem, and the Ironfoot crossbows. I just think that it's too extreme. And again, the dwarves, you know, with their Ironfoot crossbows are able to sort of inflict that on the enemy in places, but here I think that it is just a bit obnoxious. That, again, I think that the dwarven player just committing all of his elite infantry over here was a little bit of a mistake. But even so, I think that the crossbows are too extreme. Less ammunition, I think, would be prudent for them. Mainly because they're just too easy to use at the moment. Over here we can see that the Dragon Slayers trying their best to hold their own, but against Nazkai Bodyguard and Witch Realm Blackguard, even they are outmatched. There's also still a Son of Durin in there. 2 Sons of Durin. But against this much armor piercing, they are doomed. You can see there's Guardians of Khan Doom as well in the background with their shields. Still Guards of Orthanc alive as well, so they did manage to buy enough time, and they even managed to survive for their troubles. You can see that Rune is still waiting, biding their time. Is this the High Elven General up here? I'm just curious. Yes, it is. Look at him. The High Elven General, bloodied and broken. That might be a good screenshot opportunity as well. Oh. Well, back down to the fight, and again, this is rather going our way, and I have managed to return my pikes to this fight because my Noraturno warriors did retreat, and indeed the Runic Cavalry, what's left of the bodyguard, came over to occupy the Noraturno warriors, did a lot of damage on the charge as well. So again, it's like, the way we've gone about this so far is picking the legs off a spider. We're not going for the centre, we're just sort of going for the extremities, and then, hopefully, we can use our superior force in the end to just punch through their lines. Again, my pikes are getting strung out because I'm sort of engaging individual Mithril guardsmen in melee, and they're still chasing after that unit of Uruk-hai crossbowmen, so the Mithril Guard are still going. Look at those Witch Realm pikemen, and again you can see those bodyguard in the background. I think that these crossbowmen are out of ammo. They've got their swords out. If we look over here, the guards of Khazad-dûm still in melee. My hammers are all but gone. My Shadow Guard, amazingly, are still in melee. With my pikes on hand, and again, they're about to be sandwiched. Guardians of Khan Doom leading the way. So the guards of Khazad-dûm are about to be finished off once and for all. Again, the Dwarven elite infantry is able to punch way above its weight, or at least in terms of numbers. They are the heavyweights of the infantry world after all. But against the force, they, you know, engaging these cliffs with that amount of Uruk-hai crossbows, and finally the High Elven General died. The Balchoth Sapphire Bladesman killed him. up on that cliff. So Rune finally decided he had enough of that one unit and went over to kill it. Meanwhile, the dwarves are also losing all of their elite units. Let's have a look at the balance of power. We're still behind though, still 5% behind. And this is a pitch battle, remember, so it's not like the attack-defense sort of, I don't know how you'd explain it, the sort of attack-defense dynamic, whereby it's traditionally sort of how the defenders will start to really lose ground in the late game. Technically speaking, it's an even playing field, so we do need to start inflicting casualties at a greater rate again. A lot of Ariador's units are back there. Bandit Javelins as well, they do have the superior position. The Noratirno Warriors, though, in sustained melee, have managed to finish off the Runic Bodyguard. That isn't the Runic General, though. Fortunately for us. We have that Uruk-hai crossbow again. There's that valley that we're going to have to advance through on this side. Rune do have a clearer advance with their main army, but it's still going to be a challenge, so shall we say. But Rune are going to be the healthy force going into this final fight. Myself, well, particularly myself, but Isengard as well, will look a little bit battered and bruised, and we'll be facing basically a half-strength dwarf army and a mostly full-strength infantry force from Eriador/Arnor. We can see here just how strung out the fighting is getting, and even the fact that these guys are so isolated against these pikemen, the pikes will get their killing done so slowly against a unit of Mithril Guard that it doesn't matter too much. Just look at all the pikes. There's also Uruk-hai crossbows there. I will say that in terms of, like, I do like the Witch Realm pikemen. Like, the Witch Realm units in general have got a very cool armor style, I think. And in the next patch it's going to get, in a way, even cooler, because they're going to have like a sort of rusted effect on their armor to make it look like they're from the fell kingdom of Angmar that fell long ago. And I think that'll be cool. And they'll get the sort of the clean variant when you upgrade their armor, so I think that's very cool. A lot to look forward to in the next patch. And again, I think this patch started out as sort of simple balance fixing, but it turned into something much, much bigger. And I think that the next patch will be rather representative of what 1.0 will eventually look like. Obviously there will still be tweaks and there will be new factions added. But in terms of a very big sort of overhaul in terms of the balancing of the game, I think the next one will be the big one. The biggest change. Unless obviously there's like a lot of things that need, like there's a lot of like unbalanced things, but I doubt that. I mean, there's a lot of people working on it. Again, these sort of isolated Mithril Guardsmen are the ones that are being sort of killed, and unfortunately these crossbowmen, they managed to get off one last volley before being engaged in melee, and of course the Mithril Guard are now going to chew their way through a unit of crossbows that are out of ammo. The tanks of the battlefield. Oh, but if we look down here, Rune is sort of slowly starting to move up. We can see that bodyguards charging into berserkers, so that unit of berserkers is going to be gone. Almost completely destroyed, so Eriador still making use of their cavalry, good use of their cavalry. It's still an advantage they have to leverage, although he's got to be careful around Rune. I mean, the crossbows and the pikes that they have are extensive. And he's going to try and get a charge off on the Flag Rim. That's not a bad choice, honestly. They're a little bit exposed. The Gamp Rim are there, but they're a little bit out of position. You can see the stream of Rune's more elite forces coming in. And he is going to get a charge off. Again, they are spaced out, so he's not going to get a ton of kills, but it's still more damage, and it's still more forces that he won't have to try and kill through the choke points. And they need to retreat pretty quickly, because the Gamprim are there. And certainly this position is going to be tough to gate, but again, the gatekeepers are still firing. They can't have a lot of ammunition left. Again, bit of a waste on stuff like Clansmen and Dunland veterans. Now is the time to be using it, particularly Gamp Rim is a pretty good target to use them on. Then you would hold the pike advantages. Getting through gate guards is going to be very difficult for us, short of using Rune's high tier skirmish force. And again, the enemy skirmish force has got a ranged advantage with that hill, and if you look here, the Ironfoot Guard is here and all of the Ironfoot pikes, so getting through here is going to be very, very tricky. The Ironfoot Guard have got multiple HP, of course, and the Ironfoot pikemen very effective at holding the line. The Javelins as well, providing some pretty hefty skirmish support. There's some Forest Shell Heavy Swords again. Getting through here is going to be interesting. These Dunedain Rangers are still firing their missiles, and there's 2 units of pikemen. We shall see. Again, we're starting to form up over here. Now that Rune is starting to advance, we're getting ready to advance over here as well with what we can. Now, of course, the The Mithril Guard that are up on this hill will probably be victorious, but they will be tied up with my pikemen for quite a while, so they probably won't, and of course then they have a long way to go. They're very slow anyway, and they'll probably be exhausted at that point. I mean, they're already exhausted, so they will be very slow to reinforce their brethren. They're going to be the only high-tier Dwarven unit that remains from that excursion that General WVPM made. So yeah, these pikemen, they're not going to win, but they will at least tie down the Mithril Guard for the amount of time that I need to, and the rest of my army will advance on that valley position. Meanwhile, let's go over here and we can see the Ironfoot crossbowmen are firing. There's a bit of an arcing shot going on, but they're still doing a lot of damage to the low camp room, so that is fine. Also, the javelins are firing, and that's a good choice because, to be honest, I would rather use the javelins on these guys than the crossbows, simply because the javelins are much more likely to be focused down by the runic skirmishers as they advance, particularly the shadow bows. The shadow bows love an unarmoured target, and the bandit javelins are certainly unarmoured. Low tier javelins are potentially very useful. Obviously, I'm sure you've heard Cannon Fodder express his love for the Snaga skirmishers in the past, but the bandit javelins are very much in the same vein. Unfortunately, looks like they're actually throwing a lot of their javelins into the floor, which is unfortunate. Again, I do prefer axe throws simply because the arcing shots are so much better, it seems. Javelins, it always seems... and that might be the way to fix the Uruk bombers and their usability, to be honest with you. Give them the same throwing arc as the axe throwers as opposed to the javelins, which I believe they use the javelin one at the moment. They always refuse to fire if they're going to get friendly fire, and unfortunately the javelin throwing arc makes that all the more likely. These Ironfoot Guard ready to receive the runic advance. Unfortunately not armor piercing, but they are still very, very tough. It's not going to be an easy task to try and break down this final defensive position. However, we've fallen even further behind, in fact. So we still have it all to do, believe it or not, despite the fact that we have managed to sort of win the two flanks, more or less. The Mithril Guard will eventually be victorious, but the objective of destroying most of the high-tier dwarf infantry has been met. We are still falling behind. So really it comes down to Eriador. Do they have the units and the positioning left to reinforce the Dwarven Ironfoot units and achieve victory? That is the question that remains. And over here you can see that I'm trying my best to advance. Unfortunately, I'm going to be subject to the wrath of these bandit javelins. They are reloading, and not only that, but the Dunedain Rangers have been firing at me as I have advanced. My Witch-Realm Blackguard is still relatively healthy again. We were able to overwhelm the Dwarven infantry to the extent that I didn't take quite as many casualties as I feared I would against such fearsome units. And now the Dunedain Rangers are sort of trying to run away. I'm trying to get my Shadow Guard to sort of block them as they retreat. Now going through two units. Again, a single unit of pikemen is rather easily overwhelmed, but banking up 2 units of pikes is likely to hold for a little longer. And again, Arnor pikemen are no joke. In terms of sort of standard pikemen, they're one of my favourite units. As we can see, the Blackguard, I'm sort of sending up the... I've still got a lot of Rudire heavy pikes. Well, I say a lot. I've got a decent amount, in addition to the Guardians of Kharn-Dûm. Now, interestingly enough, he left a gap, and I decided to go around with my Witch-Realm Blackguard. And he's trying to get a unit of Forest Shell heavy swords to block his Dunedain Rangers' retreat. The Forest Shell swords will not last very long in melee against Witch-Realm Blackguard. Both units might be exhausted, but even so, their armour will not save them from an armour-piercing unit. Again, overall, I think, in terms of Gundabad, the Witch-Realm Blackguard might be my favourite unit, just because the style, their overall effectiveness as well. In this battle, they prove themselves to be a real powerhouse. Again, in the past, I've often found myself going for the Hammer Guard because they're a little bit cheaper, and off the charge they do a crumpling amount of damage, which for Gundabad is kind of their whole thing. You quickly get into the face of your enemy and do your damage. Actually, there goes the Runic General. He was in the unit of Kamal's Chosen, and he fell to the pikeman. Again, these Ironfoot Guard, again, the dwarves. Even these Ironfoot units, they may have lost all of their high tier units more or less, but even these Ironfoot units are very, very tough to break down, even for an armor-piercing faction like Rune. Again, these Scion Rim, though, they are armor-piercing spears. And these pikes, their formation has been broken a little bit. These Blacklock Engineers are out of ammunition and they're going to be committed to melee. They have multiple HP. So they're going to reinforce this pipeline very nicely indeed. These Ironfoot Guard there. The Scion Rim. Where's the runic? The clan crossbowmen are really what's going to turn the fight around here. The crossbow fire is going to be significant, and again against the dwarves it's just what the Doctor ordered. And over here you can see that already the fear instilled by my blackguard and the falling of their lines, sort of the side swipe essentially, has led to this sort of valley defense already breaking. So we're going to be able to join the runic attack, and it looks like he's going to need it because of the amount of losses he's taking quite quickly. Let's have a look up here on this sort of ridge. Oh, as you can, hang on, where are they? Oh no, it's up. Here we are. You can see that the Witch Round pikemen, defeat is a distinct possibility. Only 31 of them left. 35 Mithril Guardsmen. They're not going to be able to hold out much longer. But they have managed to hold off the Mithril Guard, and the Mithril Guard will be very late to the fight, down in the middle. And that's just what we need. I mean, a unit like Mithril Guard is strong enough to tilt the battle one way or the other. So we shall see if that's going to be enough, because again, you know, we're 10% behind. It's a pretty big ask to come back from 10% behind in a battle where you started off even and you now have to assault a position. But again, we do have the ranged advantage now with Rune, with all of their clan crossbows. They also have their Balchoth Sapphire Bladesmen. They also have their very, very lethal Dragon's Wrath crossbowman. And we also have the Uruk bombers somewhere, so the ranged advantage is ours. They're not going to be able to hold this line as easily as they would have liked. This Uruk High Infantry leading the way again, Isengard trying to get as much of their infantry into the fight as possible. The gatekeepers that are out of ammunition, they act like, I think it's halberdiers and not pikemen. There goes the bodyguard of Eriador. They were trying to get into the Carmel's Shadow Guard back there, and he paid the ultimate price. And again, they're not I get my words out. The Forest Shell Gatekeepers, I believe, act like halberdiers in melee. I could be wrong. I mean, with the way that they're actually using it, it might be that they act like pikemen. If they act like pikemen, that means they're more useful, I think, in my opinion. They might even be armor-piercing pikes in melee, which, you know, again, the Gatekeepers, as I said before, the first unit I pick is Eriador. They're so good. So look at that, Ironfoot pikemen trying to come in to sort of help hold the line. I'm sort of trying to get my Rudar heavy pikes in there to sort of answer that, pike to pike. And also my Blackguard is somewhere, there they are. No, that's Guardians of Kharn-Dûm, so I still have Guardians of Kharn-Dûm. There's the standard Nazkai, who haven't been committed to melee yet. Victory is apparently going to be ours, and we are starting to pull it back now, only 5%, so it quickly went from 10 to 5, and I believe that was because the crossbows started to really spray down on the enemy line. You can see that very, very quickly these bandit javelins, despite the fact that they still have ammunition, are being routed. The Forest Shell Captains are being committed to melee, and the Forest Shell Captains are a very tough unit indeed. Again, they are in the same vein as the Sons of Argonath and the Haven Guard. You don't see them quite so often because Eriador aren't as popular, but they are still very, very strong. Victory does seem certain, but they are being attacked by the crossbows, unsurprisingly. See in the background there, Arnor Gate Guards. That's still going to be a very tough unit to break through. We're going to need to use probably the Dragon's Wrath crossbow on them. But as you can see, the late game skirmish advantage, that, again, the wasted ammo from those Gatekeepers and Blacklock Engineers could prove to be terminal here, but nothing is certain because the enemy do still have a lot of elite units left, and of course my army and Isengard's army is very tired indeed. It wouldn't take much to send the vast majority of my pikemen breaking at this point. I mean, they're eager and exhausted, but that's because they're only eager because they're not actually facing a huge amount of men. I mean battle-ready Dunedain and Gatekeepers are trying to hold them back. We can see that these Nazkai are worming their way in and around the enemy lines, and that's going to be a real problem for them. I mean, this whole section will probably break the combined fear of my Blackguard and the Nazkai. Not for the faint of heart. I mean, Gatekeepers and battle-ready Dunedain don't break easy, but you can see they're shaken. A rear charge from, well, I wouldn't call that a charge so much as just an announcing of your presence, and yep, they rout. Battle-ready Dunedain are a pretty elite unit. And again, terror. It's not often you see fear actually used in a battle to a huge extent, but, well, at least not in my experience. Most of the time the routing is done by the evil factions, but here the Blackguard, the Nazkai, they were able to use fear to really help them.
Victory will be ours.
Routing relatively healthy units of Arnor pikemen and now battle-ready Dunedain, a unit they can't really afford to lose. As you can see over here, the Mithril Guard have... Well, there goes my routing Witch Realm pikeman. It's not really much of a tongue twister, but there's the Mithril Guard, 34 of them left. Trying their best to get into the fight, but at this point, it's looking poor for the defenders. I mean, they had the percentage advantage for so long, and they were on the defensive for the most part in this battle. It's rather interesting, actually, because really I think that the fatal mistake they made in the end was the one move they made that wasn't defensive in nature. I mean, Eriador did sort of make probing actions out to Isengard initially, but then they thought better of it when they saw the crossbows. Really, the thing that I think really tipped the balance of this battle in our favour was the fact that the Dwarven player sent all of his best units out on their own to try and assault the Isengard position, and the crossbows were really able to do a hefty amount of damage to them, and then the combination of myself and Isengard's elite unit was able to finish them off, with the exception of the Mithril Guard, of course, but they were taken out of the fight anyway. So this central position, with the addition of those Dwarven super heavy infantry units, would have been... I think that would have led to the forces of good winning this fight. And also, of course, a more clever use of their skirmish forces. In the end, the Runic skirmish force was able to use their ammunition much more intelligently. We can see these Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, Carmel's Shadow Guard, the Balchoth Sapphire Bladesmen. They've been using their ammunition, sparingly, shall we say. These Dragon's Wrath crossbows don't really have a good shot on something at the moment, so they're not actually shooting. They don't have a good shot on the Arnor Gate Guards yet, so they're saving their ammunition. The Ironfoot crossbowmen trying to get into melee, but at this point it's kind of too late. I mean, the defensive line is shattering in all sorts of places. The Blackguard have managed to recharge sort of the remaining Ironfoot pike unit, and the Blackguard, for me, were my MVPs in this battle. I mean, if you think about all the units they engaged Imladris Guards, they engaged, I think, Elder Enway's Swordsmen, Falas Lords, and then when you went over, when they fought the Dwarves, they faced Sons of Durin, Dragon Slayers of Evered Mithrem, Guards of Khazad Dûm. Now here in the middle, they were facing off against Ironfoot Pikemen, Forestshell Gatekeepers, Battle-Ready Dunedain, and I believe as well they end up... The place they end the battle is fighting against the Forestshell captains, and they still aren't all dead, so... Again, they did have help for the vast majority of that. Obviously they weren't on their own, just tanking through the damage, but it just goes to show how good a unit they really are. Certainly very strong. Maybe not Temple Inquisitor strong, but pretty darn close. And that's... praise doesn't get much higher than that. Obviously the Elder Palace Guard are still claim their throne of being so strong. Again, the Dragon's Wrath crossbows reloading their splinter shot. We haven't actually seen that. I think they're trying to get a shot, but they're sort of blocked at the moment, so they're not actually firing. We can see that these Carmel's Shadow Guard are trying to sort of break through to the one remaining Ironfoot crossbowman unit. And of course, Carmel's Shadow Guard, good against armour. There you can see my Blackguard, yeah, they're going to get into... They are being the subject of crossbow fire, so they are going to start to fall, but it's going to be a bit too late. They're going to try and join the Scion Rim in trying to kill these Forestshell captains. Not the easiest task. In the background we can see Fire Grim returning to the fight. The Balchoth, there goes the splinter shot. Truly deadly. These Arnor Gate Guards, though, victory seems certain. Pikemen with hit points is so scary in this game. And of course the Arnor Gate Guards have that distinction all to themselves. They don't have quite the killing power. Oh, there's the Uruk Bombers. They don't have quite the killing power of the Imladris Guards, but I think the hit points are worth it, to be honest. Are we going to see more bombs? Where are the bombers? There goes the splinter shot. That crossbow unit, though. The subject of splinter shot and bombs. Where are the bombs? That's the Nazkai being poked to death by the gate guards. There are the bombers. Come on, bombs. Yes. Bro. Please don't tell me that was... Yeah, see, this is the problem with the bombers. They're as reluctant to throw their payload as catapults often are when your units are near them. And they don't have the trajectory of axe throwers. I think they have the trajectory of javelins, which means they need a relatively straight shot, which doesn't really help. Regardless, it was nice to see a bomb in the periphery. Most people don't take them for obvious reasons. They're not very easy to use and they are very expensive. Potentially very damaging, but also expensive. Uruk-hai crossbows and Scion Rim finishing off these Ironfoot crossbowmen. These Arnor Gate Guards, they're routing. The Arnor Gate Guards. I think that was actually because well no, no one admitted defeat. The Arnor Gate Guards routed? That's unbelievable. One of the hardiest units. Maybe someone did admit defeat and I was just not paying attention. Again, that is a unit you do not expect to rout. And yeah, as you can see, basically the end. Brute force won this day. The clattering force of Gundabad combined with the armour piercing of Rune and the balanced nature of Isengard was enough to overcome the defensive nature of the High Elves, Eriador and the Dwarves. Again, I think that the High Elves were isolated due to the nature of the map, but the High Elves could have set themselves out to be much harder a target than they ended up being. If they deployed back on the hill in a more defensive stance, they would have been able to do a bit more, I think. Again, their cavalry would have largely been fairly useless, to be honest, to be brutal. But I think a defensive stance would have served them much better. In the end, they weren't really able to get their ducks in a row. Like their pikes were sort of caught out and isolated and overwhelmed. The Imladris guards have got such killing power, but they were overwhelmed. And again, most of their infantry just couldn't cope with the sheer numbers that came at them from the front, and then of course the runic cavalry that came at them from behind. And again, this is a free-for-all. I mean, there's no rule that says it has to be 3 1v1s that play out individually, especially not when the forces of good were clearly trying to set up defensive positions. I mean, the dwarves, they were camping on that mountain back there initially, and then they moved forward. And then they strangely decided not to camp and decided to charge forward with their elites and go for the cliffs that Isengard were occupying. It was quite odd. But yes, this is the victory, and now those Uruk bombers are just sort of waiting in position. And now there's, I think the Nazkai bodyguard and the Mithril guard sort of have a duel. So we may as well fast forward times 6 until that happens. Just a bunch of manoeuvring. But yes, again, I always bemoan players when they play too defensively. But interestingly enough, it was really the one super aggressive action that the Dwarven player made that I think cost the forces of good this fight and gave it to us. Again, I don't think it was a result of any clever play from us other than the fact that we decided to sort of isolate chunks and sort of try and deal with them. And again, the Balchot Sapphire Bladesmen are going to rip through the Mithril Guard from behind while the Nazkai bodyguard destroy them from the front. Here come, well, that's overkill. Dragon's Wrath crossbows as well, reloading. There's the splinter shot. You can't actually see it on times 6 speed. But yes. Again, I think that we were more coordinated than our team was a little bit more coordinated, maybe. But yeah, it was a good fight. I mean, it had its ebbs and flows. At one point, when we were over 10% behind, I was starting to think, that final position's probably not going to be able to take it. But ultimately, it was the runic skirmish power in the late game. Again, that late game skirmish power that won us the fight, I believe. And obviously, you know, throughout the fight, things could have gone differently. Obviously, the enemy also had considerably less units deployed than we did. So obviously, I had the lowest kills on the field. Not too surprising, considering I had to go up against the High Elves in the early game. And they savaged me a little bit. I mean, I did have an army left over after facing them. It would have been much less of an army had I not had the benefit of the runic cavalry also giving me a hand. But even so. And then we had, of course, the dwarves and Eriador getting the most kills, so good for them. Again, I think their skirmishers and their cavalry really helped them with that. But if we look at my stats, we can see Witch Realm Inquisitors didn't get, my Cav didn't get much, but they did at least manage to do a decent amount of damage to the High Elven Cav before they died. The Mountain Trolls managed to kill, I think it was 1 unit of Mythlon Nobles, or something like that, before they were then stomped into the dirt by Noldor Elders. My Pikes, they did their job. Again, Witch Realm Pikes didn't get a ton of kills, but they did their job. The Rudar Pikes did slightly better, but that's because they survived longer. Again, Rudar heavy pikes, I believe, are the only pikes in the game with a shield value, so they're not quite as vulnerable to missiles as most pikemen are. Guardians of Kharndoom getting a decent amount of kills each. Again, 134 is not bad at all. Rudar Berserkers getting just 13 and 16 each, but again, they took the brunt of the High Elven Fury, to be honest with you. They were the ones that took the casualties from the Imladris Guards and then from the Noldor Elder Nobles. Numenorian Shadowguard getting a decent amount of kills again. Goblin Trackers not doing so well, of course. Witchround Blackguard being my MVPs, 206, of course. All those units that they managed to face and survive and get a decent amount of kills on each. Witchround Hammerguard, not too bad, again. Considering we were facing factions that are low in number traditionally, I wasn't too upset with this performance from Gundabad. Of course, you know, the Gundabad rush is real. And yeah, obviously I think Eriador deserves quite a lot of credit. If they had targeted better things with their skirmishers, and if the dwarves hadn't committed their super heavy infantry units to that cliff over there, I think the forces of good would have won. I think the High Elves did a good enough job of blunting a decent amount of my units and doing a half decent amount of damage on Rune that would have stood them in good stead in the late game, I think. But again, that's a what if. The fact is that the forces of evil won in a 3v3 sort of, I don't know if I call this a pitch, but yeah, you know, a pitch battle. So yeah, this was a fun one to play, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.